Desmond Whitfield was 44 years old when he finally finished paying off his wife's dream house. 12 years of marriage, 15 years building his architecture firm from a folding table in his garage, all leading to this one surprise. He pulled out the framed deed, watched Camille's eyes light up, and pulled her into a hug to celebrate. He had no idea that hug would end his marriage. Because, as her face pressed against his shoulder, hidden from view, Camille whispered 4 words she never meant for him to hear. Words about him, about his life, about what she wanted instead of it. Desmond stood frozen, his arms still wrapped around the woman he trusted completely, processing what he'd just heard her say under her breath. She pulled back, smiling, asked if he was okay, never knowing he'd heard a single word. He smiled back and said nothing. But somewhere behind that smile, a 15-year marriage had just quietly ended. And Camille had no idea the man she'd just whispered those words to was already 3 steps ahead of her. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The blueprints didn't lie. That was the thing Desmond loved most about them. Every line meant something. Every measurement had a purpose. There was no room for pretending, no space for a number that didn't hold up. You either built it right, or you didn't build it at all. He stood alone at the long drafting table in the center of his office, both palms flat against the paper, studying the elevation drawing for the Harmon Cultural Center. The city had awarded the project to his firm 8 months ago. It was the biggest contract in the firm's history. His firm. His name on the glass door at the end of the hall. Whitfield & Voss Design Group. Whitfield came first. Always had. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, downtown was still asleep. The sky was the deep, bruised blue of early morning. Not quite dark, not yet light. It was 5:47 a.m. Desmond had been here since 5. He liked this hour. The phones were quiet. The emails could wait. It was just him and the work, the way it had been in the beginning, when the drafting table was a folding card table pushed against the wall of his garage, and the office was a dream he hadn't told anyone about yet. 15 years. He straightened up and looked around the space, the high ceilings, the warm wood paneling, the framed prints of every major project the firm had ever completed, lined up along the north wall in chronological order, a visual record of 15 years of hard, precise, never-quit work. The first print was small, almost modest, a 2-bedroom residential addition in a quiet neighborhood. The last one took up nearly a full panel, the kind of building that made people look up. He'd built all of it from nothing. His father used to say, "Desmond, a man's work should speak loud enough that he doesn't have to." His father had also gotten cheated out of a small hardware business by a man he trusted with his books. The store closed, the family recovered, slowly, and his father never quite stood the same way again after that. Desmond was 17 when it happened. He'd watched the whole thing and made himself a promise he'd never broken. Pay attention to everything, and don't get caught sleeping. He rolled the Harmon blueprints carefully and set them back in their tube. Then he opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a thick legal envelope, matte white, sealed, unremarkable from the outside. He set it on the desk and looked at it for a moment. Inside was the payoff confirmation for 4114 Sable Creek Drive, their home. He'd been making extra principal payments for 3 years without telling Camille. Not to deceive her, just to build toward something he wanted to give her whole, not in pieces. 2 weeks from now, on their 12th anniversary, he'd planned to present it over dinner. The house, free and clear. No more mortgage, just theirs. He'd also restructured his draw from the firm, quietly, carefully, so he was finally pulling a real salary instead of reinvesting every dollar back into operations. They could breathe now. Actually breathe. He thought about Camille's face when she found out. He smiled, slow and private. the way a man smiles when he knows he's done something right. But there had been a few moments lately that he'd filed away without examining too closely. Like 3 weeks ago, at the Alderton dinner, a quarterly thing Philip hosted for their top-tier clients, all dark wood and candlelight, and the kind of wine Philip ordered specifically to be seen ordering it. Desmond had watched Camille lean into Philip's shoulder, laughing at something, her hand resting on his forearm a beat longer than necessary. A nothing moment. Probably. They'd all known each other for years. Or the comment she'd made in the car on the way home from the Hendersons last month, almost too casual. I don't know what I'd do without that house. Not our house. Just the house. Like it was a structure she lived inside rather than a home they'd built together. Or the irritation that had flashed across her face, quick and clean, gone before she probably knew he'd seen it. When he'd mentioned pulling back on personal travel for a few months while the Harmon project hit its peak. What does that mean, scaling back? She'd asked. Just for a few months, until the pressure lifts. She'd smiled after that, said it was fine. But the smile came half a second too late. He hadn't let himself think too hard about any of it. Camille was image-conscious, always had been. She liked things a certain way. She'd given up her own design work years ago to manage their household, to be present, to hold the domestic side of their life together while he built the professional side. That kind of sacrifice had its pressures. He understood that. He tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket and clicked off the drafting light. He was going to go home and show her the deed early. He didn't want to wait 2 weeks. He wanted to see her face tonight. Wanted to watch her understand what he'd been quietly building toward for them, for her. He was still smiling as he pulled the door shut behind him. By 7:30 that evening, Desmond was in their kitchen, the framed deed documents resting on the counter behind him, face down, waiting. He heard Camille's heels on the hardwood before he saw her, light and steady, coming down the hall. He turned around. He was ready. He was smiling. Camille stopped in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes went to his hands first. The framed documents. The legal paper inside the glass, neat and official-looking. Her brow pulled together. That small, pretty confusion she made when she was working something out. "What is that?" she asked. Desmond smiled and held it out to her. "Take a look." She crossed the kitchen slowly, her heels quiet now on the tile, and took the frame from him with both hands. She tilted it toward the light. He watched her eyes move across the page, watched the moment it landed. The mortgage account number? The balance column? The zero? "Des!" She looked up. Is this the house?" "Paid off," he said. "All of it. I've been making extra payments for about 3 years. Wanted to wait until I could hand it to you whole." He shrugged, almost shy about it. "It's ours. No bank, no lien, just ours." What happened next was so fast he almost missed it. Something moved across her face. Not joy. Not the bright, warm flood of relief he'd been imagining on the drive home. It was something colder than that. A kind of rapid, quiet calculation, like a chess player who'd just seen the board shift in a direction they hadn't planned for. Her eyes sharpened. Her jaw tightened. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then she caught herself. The smile came, wide and warm, her eyes going soft at the corners, and she made a sound in her throat, a small, overwhelmed exhale, and set the frame carefully on the counter. She stepped into him and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him close. "Thank you," she murmured into his shoulder. "I can't believe you did this." He brought his arms up around her back. She smelled like her usual perfume, something floral and expensive that he used to love. He almost said, "I'd do anything for you." He didn't get the chance, because that was when he heard it. Low, barely there. A breath more than a voice. Her face turned away from him, buried against the side of his neck where the words would go nowhere, where they were clearly never meant to land anywhere at all. "The best gift would be if you just died." Desmond stopped breathing. His arms were still around her. His body didn't move. He made sure of that. Every disciplined, controlled part of him locked down in an instant, because something animal and cold had just flooded his chest, and he could not let her feel it. He stood perfectly still and let her hold him, and said absolutely nothing. She pulled back after a moment, hands sliding to his shoulders, and looked at his face. "You okay?" A little tilt of her head. Warm concern. The picture of a wife who loved her husband. "Yeah." His voice came out even, almost easy. "Just tired. Long day." She searched his face for another second, and whatever she was looking for, she seemed satisfied she didn't find it. She kissed his cheek, picked up the frame, said something about finding the perfect place to hang it, and walked out of the kitchen. He stood at the counter for a long time after she left. He lay awake beside her at 3 a.m. and listened to the air conditioner hum. Camille was asleep. Her breathing was slow and even. One hand tucked beneath her cheek, her face slack and unguarded in the dark. She looked peaceful. She looked like someone with nothing on her conscience. Desmond stared at the ceiling. He'd spent the last several hours trying to give the words a different shape. He'd run them back, tried to hear them differently, tried to make them softer, or broken, or half-formed. A dark joke she hadn't meant. A fragment of frustration he'd mistaken for something it wasn't. The air conditioner was loud. The room had been dim. He'd been emotional, expectant, already a little raw from the buildup of anticipation. But the clarity of it wouldn't move. He knew what he'd heard. He was a man who paid attention to everything, to the turn of a line in a blueprint, to the load-bearing logic of a structure, to the half-second delay in a smile. He had trained himself for 30 years to notice exactly what was in front of him and not flinch from it. He heard what she said. The ceiling offered nothing back. He thought about his father's hardware store, about the man his father trusted with the books, about how long that man had been smiling across the dinner table before the accounts finally came up empty. He thought about what Camille's face had done before the smile arrived. He thought about what she'd said in the car last month. "I don't know what I'd do without that house. Not our house. The house." Desmond exhaled slowly through his nose and made no sound at all. He wasn't going to confront her. Not tonight. Not on the raw edge of a wound this fresh, with no ground beneath him and nothing in his hands. He knew what happened to men who reacted before they understood the full structure of what they were dealing with. They lost. He needed proof. He needed to understand exactly what he was standing inside before he moved a single inch. He stared at the ceiling until the sky outside began to lighten, and he didn't sleep at all. Desmond made her coffee the next morning. He measured the grounds the same way he always did. 2 scoops, level, not heaped. He listened to the machine run while he stood at the counter in his work clothes, and when Camille came downstairs in her robe, her hair loose, he handed her the mug without being asked. "Morning," she said, wrapping both hands around it. "Morning." He was already looking at his phone. "Traffic's light today. I'll probably head in early." She made a small sound of acknowledgement and drifted toward the window. He watched her from the corner of his eye, the way she stood in the morning light, loose and unhurried, sipping her coffee with the ease of a woman who'd slept just fine. And he thought, she doesn't know. That single fact was the only thing keeping him steady. She didn't know he'd heard her, which meant he still had time, which meant he could still move carefully, the way a man should move when the ground he's standing on might be hollow underneath. He kissed her on the cheek before he left. She leaned into it. He drove to work and didn't turn the radio on. The day was long and ordinary on the surface. He took meetings. He reviewed the revised elevation drawings for the Harmon Street project. He signed off on a materials order. He did all of it the same way he always did, quietly, precisely, without wasted motion. To anyone watching, Desmond Whitfield was having a perfectly unremarkable Tuesday. Underneath, he was building a list. Small things he'd dismissed. Small things that now, arranged in a row instead of scattered across months, made a different kind of shape. Camille's strange mood at the partners' dinner back in February, the way Philip had touched the small of her back when he thought Desmond had stepped away. A weekend she'd called a girls' trip that Philip had also missed work for, which Desmond had noted and let go of because he trusted them both. He wrote none of it down. He kept it in his head, where it was safe, and he watched the shape of it grow. He got home before her that evening. He changed out of his work clothes, made himself eat something, and was cleaning up when he heard the shower start upstairs. He stood in the kitchen, perfectly still, and just listened to the pipes. Then her phone lit up on the counter. She'd left it face up. The screen glowed bright in the dim kitchen, and even from where he stood, 3-4 feet away, he could read it clearly. Philip. She say anything yet, LOL. After the trip, you'll be set. Trust. Desmond looked at it for a long moment. He didn't touch the phone. He didn't pick it up. He stood where he was and read the message again, slowly, until every word had settled somewhere permanent inside him. After the trip, you'll be set. The trip she knew nothing about yet. The Amalfi trip he hadn't told her about couldn't be what Philip meant, which meant there was another trip, or the trip meant something else entirely. Either way, Philip knew something about Camille's future that Desmond was not supposed to know about, and he'd used the word set, the way men use it when they're talking about money. He stepped back from the counter. The shower was still running upstairs. Steam would be curling out from under the bathroom door. Camille would be in there, warm and relaxed, thinking whatever she thought when she thought she was alone. He turned and walked to the other side of the kitchen, and he pressed his hands flat on the table, and he breathed. She'd told Philip what she'd whispered. It wasn't dark humor. It wasn't a slip, or a fragment of exhaustion, or a half-formed thing. She'd said it to him, her husband, and then she'd turned around and said it to someone else, and that someone else had laughed. Desmond stood there until his breathing was even again. That night, after the lights went out and her breathing went slow and deep, he took his phone to the bathroom, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of the tub. He opened his travel app first. The Amalfi reservation, 11 nights, the cliffside hotel she'd mentioned so many times over the years that he'd memorized the name of it. He'd booked it 4 months ago, paid the deposit himself. He canceled it. Then he opened his banking app and pulled up the wire transfer queue he'd built over the past few months. The final payments that would have moved the deed cleanly into both their names as an anniversary gift. He'd been so careful with it, so patient. He froze, everyone. He sat in the quiet for a minute after that, phone face down on his knee, and looked at the tile floor. Then he called Octavia. She picked up on the second ring. It was almost midnight, but his sister answered like she'd been waiting. Des. Her voice was careful. What's wrong? Something is, he said. I don't have the full picture yet, but I need your help, and I need it quiet. A pause. He heard her sit up. Tell me what you know, she said. He did. By the time he hung up, closer to 1 in the morning than midnight, one thing was completely clear in his mind. He would not move. He would not react. He would not let either of them know that anything had changed, not until he understood exactly how deep this went. The coffee shop was on Mercer Street, 12 blocks from the office. Desmond picked it because nobody from the firm came here. It was the kind of place that kept its lights too low and its music too quiet, catering to people who wanted to sit with their laptops and be left alone. Nobody would notice 2 men at a corner table with a folder between them. Tobias Greer was already there when Desmond arrived. That was Tobias, always early, always positioned with his back to the wall so he could see the room. He was a lean, careful-looking man, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a yellow legal pad in front of him that was already half covered in notes. He looked up when Desmond came through the door, gave a small nod, and went back to his writing without making a show of the greeting. That was also Tobias. They'd known each other since a cramped two-bed dorm room at 20 years old. Desmond had never had to explain himself to Tobias. He didn't plan to start now. He sat down. A coffee was already waiting. "Appreciate you coming out," Desmond said. "You said it was important." Tobias capped his pen. "So it's important." Desmond wrapped his hands around the mug. "I need a quiet audit. Full review of the firm's books, vendor contracts, invoice records, subcontractor payments. Everything for the last 3 years." Tobias studied him. "Routine?" "Frame it that way, yes." Tobias was quiet for a moment. He had a habit of sitting with silence, the way other people sat with a drink, patiently, letting it settle before he moved. "And the real reason?" "I'm not sure yet," Desmond said, which was honest enough. "I just need someone I trust to look at the numbers before I know what questions to ask." Tobias picked up his pen, wrote something, and nodded once. "I'll need access to the accounting software and the original vendor contracts. Can you get me red access without running it through Voss?" "Yes." "Then I'll start Monday." They didn't talk about it again after that. They finished their coffees, talked for a while about nothing in particular. An old mutual friend's new restaurant, a construction project Tobias had driven past and found offensive. And then they went their separate ways. Desmond drove back to the office. Philip was in the hallway when he walked in, jacket on, keys in hand, grinning the easy grin that had probably opened 100 doors for him over the years. "There he is," Philip said. "Lunch ran long. You good?" "All good," Desmond said. "Harmon Street revisions are on your desk." "Perfect." Philip clapped him once on the shoulder as he passed. "You're the engine that keeps this thing running, Des." "I mean that." Desmond smiled. "I know you do." The next 8 days were the quietest kind of work. Tobias didn't call. He didn't email from a traceable account. Every evening around 7, he sent a single text to Desmond's personal phone. One word, always the same: ongoing. That was enough. It told Desmond the work was moving, and nothing had been disrupted. He would text back a thumbs up and put the phone away. At the office, Desmond was exactly who he always was. He reviewed drawings. He walked job sites. He sat across from Philip in Tuesday's partners meeting and listened to him talk about Q3 client prospects, nodding in the right places, asking reasonable questions. Philip had a gift for the room. He always had. He could make a half-baked idea sound inevitable, and he never seemed to run out of energy for the performance of it. Desmond had always respected that, in the way you respect a tool that's well made for its purpose. Now he just watched it and filed it away. On the 9th day, Tobias called. "I need to show you something in person," he said. "Not over the phone." They met in Tobias's car, parked in the lot behind a dry cleaner on Fowler Avenue. Engine off. Nobody around. Tobias had a folder on his lap. Thick, tabbed, the kind of folder a man puts together when he's been thorough. 3 years, Tobias said, opening it. He didn't ease into it. That wasn't his way. Philip has been inflating vendor invoices, 15% on average, sometimes more. The overages get routed to a subcontractor called Veridian Build Solutions. He tapped a page. Veridian doesn't have a real office. No employees on record. It's a shell. Desmond looked at the pages without touching them. The LLC, Tobias continued, is registered in the state of Georgia. He turned to a specific tab and held the folder so Desmond could read clearly. The name on the registration was printed in plain black type. Veridian Build Solutions, LLC. Registered agent, C. Renee Montague. Desmond knew that name. He hadn't heard it in 12 years, but he knew it. Montague was Camille's maiden name. He sat with that for a moment, let it settle into the right place, where it couldn't be argued with or softened. Tobias closed the folder slowly and held it out to him. "This is only the beginning of what we'll find, Des. Octavia arrived at 7:15 on a Wednesday evening. She didn't ring the bell. She never did. She knocked twice, short and sharp, then let herself in with the spare key she'd had since before Desmond and Camille moved into this house. That key had always irritated Camille. Desmond had never asked for it back. He was in his home office when he heard the front door open. He didn't get up. He knew her footsteps. She appeared in the doorway a moment later, a trim, dark-skinned woman in a charcoal blazer, her natural hair pulled back, a leather document bag over one shoulder, and a look on her face that she was working hard to keep neutral. Octavia had the same eyes as their mother, quiet eyes that missed nothing, and forgave, slowly. "Where's Camille?" she said first. "Spin class, back by 9. Octavia looked at her watch, then at him. She came inside and closed the door behind her. "Good," she said. She set the document bag on his desk and pulled out a chair. She didn't sit in it so much as occupy it, squared up, deliberate, the same way she sat in courtrooms. "I've been pulling records since your call. I need you to hear this all the way through before you say anything." Desmond nodded. She opened the bag and laid out a set of documents side by side like she was arranging evidence, which, Desmond understood, was exactly what she was doing. "6 months ago," Octavia began, "Camille met with an estate attorney, a man named Gerald Price. He runs a small practice out of Decatur, no connection to your usual legal team. She went alone." She tapped the first document. Price helped her draft a new beneficiary designation, a formal amendment to the marital trust you two set up in 2018. Desmond looked at the document. His name was on it at the top. His signature was at the bottom. He had never signed it. "That's a forged notarization," Octavia said. "The notary stamp belongs to a woman who retired from active practice 14 months ago. She didn't notarize this. Someone used her old seal." She let that land for a second. "The designation names Camille as sole heir to the marital home and to your 70% stake in the firm. The transfer is contingent on your death, or," she pointed to a specific clause, "on what the document calls permanent incapacitation, rendering the primary holder unable to conduct business affairs." The room was very quiet. Outside, somewhere down the block, a neighbor's sprinkler system clicked on. The sound of it drifted through the window, soft and ordinary, absurd against the silence inside the office. Desmond looked at the clause she was pointing to. He read it twice. Then he sat back in his chair and stared at the wall for a moment. The whisper came back to him. The best gift would be if you just died. He had spent days trying to frame it as something else, a dark joke she hadn't meant to say out loud, a careless slip of frustration that sounded worse than it was. He had built arguments in his head at 3 a.m, reasons a person might murmur something like that and still not mean it, still not want it. The document on his desk ended every single one of those arguments. She hadn't slipped. She hadn't vented. She had planned. And the plan had been moving for 6 months, filed with a notary seal, waiting on nothing except the right moment. "Des," Octavia's voice was careful, not soft, careful. She knew the difference between when he needed comfort and when he needed a handhold. "You're with me?" "I'm with you," he said. He brought his eyes back to the desk, back to the document. The part of his brain that processed information the way he processed blueprints, edge to edge, load to load, looking for what held and what didn't, was already working. "What can you file right now without alerting her?" he asked. Octavia had clearly been ready for that question. She reached back into the bag. "I can begin a quiet dissolution of the marital trust. There's a provision in the 2018 agreement that allows either party to restructure the trust's asset designations upon written request from the primary holder. That's you." She set another document in front of him. "I filed this with the court. Your assets are severed from the trust before she can act on any of this. She won't be notified unless the full dissolution goes to a hearing, and I can delay that. How long? 8 weeks, maybe 10. That's enough time. Octavia studied him. You want to tell me what you're waiting on? Philip, Desmond said. I know what Tobias found, but I don't have the full picture of how deep Philip's involvement runs with Camille specifically. I want that clearly documented before anything surfaces. Octavia was quiet. Then she picked up the forged will and tucked it back into her document bag with the careful, precise movements of someone handling something that would matter later in a room with better lighting. All right, she said. She stood, swung the bag over her shoulder, and looked at him one last time before turning toward the door. Keep acting normal at home a little longer. Camille noticed on a Thursday. She didn't say anything right away. That wasn't her style. She watched first, tracked the small things, catalogued them, decided what they meant. It was one of the qualities that had made her a sharp interior designer years ago. Before she'd stopped working, she had an eye for what didn't fit. And Desmond, lately, didn't fit. He was still there. He still kissed her cheek in the morning, still asked about her day, still sat across from her at dinner and answered questions. But something behind his eyes had changed. It was subtle, the kind of thing most people would miss. Camille wasn't most people. There was a distance in him now, a quiet she couldn't quite reach through. By Friday evening, she was anxious. By Sunday, she was doing what she always did when she felt the ground shifting. She started building something on top of it. She called the restaurant herself that Sunday. Oleander, a candlelit place in Midtown where they'd had their 3rd anniversary dinner, where the tables were draped in white linen and the lighting made everything feel significant. She booked their old corner table for the upcoming Saturday. She told the manager it was a special occasion and asked about the tasting menu. Then she called her friend Dana. Desmond was reading in the next room, close enough to hear the shape of the conversation through the wall without making out every word. He could hear her voice shift into its warm social register, the one she used when she was being observed, when what she said was also a performance. He's been so focused lately, she was saying. You know how he gets. I just think he works too hard. I'm planning this dinner for us. Something really meaningful. He deserves it. Desmond turned a page. She came to find him that evening while he was reviewing a project file at the kitchen table. She set a glass of sparkling water beside him without being asked, then leaned against the counter with her arms crossed loosely, her head tilted just slightly. Her careful, attentive look. I made a reservation at Oleander, she said, for Saturday. Anniversary dinner. That sounds nice, Desmond said. He didn't look up immediately. Then he did. He gave her a small, warm smile, the kind that was true enough to be convincing. Really? Thank you. Something in her shoulders loosened. She moved to sit across from him. I've also been thinking, she said, about us. She paused in the way that people pause when they've rehearsed what comes next. Maybe it's time. For a baby. She let the words settle. I think it would give us something new to look forward to. Something real. Desmond looked at her for a moment. The word real hung in the air between them. Let's talk about it after the anniversary, he said. Easy. Measured. He reached across and briefly covered her hand with his. One thing at a time. She smiled, and behind her smile was the visible flicker of relief. Monday morning arrived gray and close, the sky low over downtown, the kind of morning that flattened everything. Desmond was at his desk by 8. He had a site review at 10 and a vendor call at noon. By 2 in the afternoon, Philip was at his office door. He came in easy. He always came in easy. One shoulder leaned against the door frame, the loosened collar, the grin that had charmed clients at lunches for 15 years. Philip had a gift for looking like he belonged in a room, regardless of whether he'd earned his place in it. Got a minute? Philip said. Sure. Desmond gestured to the chair across from him. Philip sat and crossed one leg over the other. I've been thinking about the restructuring conversation we started back in the spring. The buyout terms. The share buyout? Your 70%. Philip said it lightly. like it was a minor detail. I know you've had a lot on your plate lately, but the timing actually works well right now. The Mercer project is in between phases. The books look the way they look. I had a number in mind. He named it. It was 30% below market value. Desmond kept his face still. He picked up his pen and turned it once between his fingers. "That's a number," he said. "It's a fair offer given where we are right now." Down the hall, in the project archive room, Yvonne Castellano was logging a set of contracts from 2021 into a reorganized filing system, something she'd started quietly 3 weeks ago on her own initiative, without a word to anyone. She moved through them methodically. When she came to a vendor agreement she didn't recognize, she set it aside. She'd already found 4 others like it. She placed them in a separate manila folder and wrote, "Original. Do not discard," on the tab in her careful, even hand. She knew her own handwriting. None of the signatures on Philip's versions matched what she held now. Back in Desmond's office, Philip was still waiting. "I need more time," Desmond said simply. "A few more weeks. I want to look at the numbers carefully before I commit to anything." Philip's smile stayed in place. "Of course. No rush." He stood, adjusted his jacket, and headed for the door. Desmond watched him go. The office felt different after 5 o'clock. The phones stopped. The hum of the front desk computers went quiet. The hallway that connected Desmond's office to the rest of the floor emptied out one person at a time, until only the building's low ventilation remained, steady and indifferent. Desmond was still at his desk when Yvonne knocked. She didn't open the door all the way, just enough to lean in, one hand on the frame. She was still in her work clothes, navy slacks, a gray blouse, but her reading glasses were pushed up on top of her head, and she was holding a manila folder against her chest with both hands. "Do you have a minute?" she said. Her voice was level, but her eyes weren't. "Close the door," Desmond said. She sat in the chair across from him, the same chair Philip had occupied that afternoon, and placed the folder on the edge of the desk. She didn't open it yet. She looked at him first, the way a person looks at someone before they say something they can't unsay. "I found something," she said. "Actually, I found several somethings. I've been reorganizing the contract archives for the past few weeks. I wasn't looking for anything specific." She paused. "But I started finding agreements I didn't recognize. Vendor contracts with Philip's signature that don't match what we have on file." "What do you mean, don't match?" She opened the folder. Inside was a stack of documents, maybe a dozen pages, separated by small yellow tabs. She turned the top sheet toward him. It was a vendor agreement from 2019. A subcontractor called Meridian Build Solutions. The name meant nothing to Desmond at first. Then it did. It was one of the shell entities Tobias had flagged in his audit. But what Tobias hadn't found, what was sitting right in front of Desmond now, was the original signed version, the one before Philip had touched it. The dollar figures were different. The payment schedule was different. And the routing addendum at the bottom, the quiet clause that redirected a portion of vendor payments to a secondary account, simply did not exist in the original. Desmond looked at the date, June 2019. His mother had died in August of that year. "Keep going," he said. Yvonne turned to the next tab. "This is from October of that same year." She pointed to a line item on a financial addendum. "The Memorial Scholarship Fund, the one you set up through the firm." Desmond had established the scholarship 2 months after his mother's funeral. $15,000, drawn from firm operating funds he'd personally earmarked, designated for architecture students at the community college she'd attended before she had to drop out to raise him and Octavia. He'd never publicized it. He'd just done it, quietly, because she would have loved it. The document Yvonne was showing him listed the scholarship disbursement. The original figure was $15,000. In Philip's version, the figure recorded in the firm's books was $9,000. $6,000 had gone somewhere else. Desmond sat very still. He looked at the number for a long time. The ventilation hummed. Outside, the city moved. "There are 3 more," Yvonne said softly. "All 2019. All before—" She stopped. "Before I understood what I was looking at." Desmond closed the folder. Not because he was done looking, because he had seen enough. The affair could have been something that happened between broken people. The embezzlement could have been greed, the kind of greed that grows slowly in men who feel entitled to more than they built. But this, $6,000 taken from a fund named for his mother, money meant for students who couldn't afford what she couldn't afford. This wasn't greed dressed up as ambition. This was contempt for him, for what he cared about, for everything he thought he'd shared with both of them. Whatever small, quiet part of him had still been waiting for another explanation went dark. "Yvonne," his voice was steady, "I need you to not discuss this with anyone. Not a single person in this building." "I know," she said. "I haven't. I'm going to need these documents. And I'm going to need you." She met his eyes. "I know that too." He held her gaze for a moment. "Thank you," he said. Just that. But he meant it in a way that didn't require more words, and she received it that way. They met at Octavia's house at 9 o'clock that night. Desmond, Octavia, and Tobias, at the wide oak table in her home office where she worked late-night cases. The overhead light was bright and white. There were no candles, no ambient warmth. This wasn't that kind of meeting. Tobias spread his audit file across one side of the table. Octavia laid out the forged will documentation beside it. Desmond placed Yvonne's folder at the center. For an hour, they went through everything. Document by document, number by number. The shell company, the altered contracts, the forged notarization, the scholarship account. Each piece connected to the next like load-bearing structure. Nothing decorative, nothing redundant. When they were done, Tobias capped his pen and sat back. "It's airtight," he said. "Every piece has a source. None of it needs interpretation." Octavia tapped the edge of the forged will with one finger, looking at Desmond. "I can have the legal filings ready in 10 days. But we need a setting. The evidence doesn't just need to be presented. It needs to be witnessed." She paused. "They need to be in the room. Investors, family, people whose opinion they care about." "The anniversary dinner," Desmond said. "Camille already booked Oleander," Octavia said. "She did." He looked at his sister. "Let her keep it." Tobias looked between them. "What date?" "Saturday," Desmond said. "She made the reservation herself." Octavia was quiet for a moment. Then she gathered her documents and squared them against the table, precise and deliberate. She looked at her brother. "Once it starts," she said, "there is no stopping it. No pulling back, no quiet settlement in a back room." Her voice was flat and certain. "Everything comes out in front of everyone. You understand that." Desmond looked at her steadily. "I understood that," he said, "the night I called you." Desmond told her on a Tuesday evening, over dinner. He'd cooked. Simple things: grilled salmon, roasted potatoes, a green salad with the lemon dressing she liked. He set the table properly, cloth napkins and everything, and he poured her wine before he poured his own. He did all of it with the kind of care that used to come naturally and now required calculation. Camille noticed. Of course she did. She'd been watching him for days, the way a person watches weather they can't quite read. Alert, hopeful, slightly nervous. When he set her glass down in front of her and actually smiled, her shoulders dropped an inch. "What's all this?" she said. "I've been distant," he said. "Work stress. I know it." He sat down across from her. "I want to make it up to you." She tilted her head. Soft eyes. The performance she did when she was deciding whether to trust something. "You don't have to explain." "I'm planning a dinner," he said. "Saturday. At Oleander." She blinked. That's where I already made the reservation. I know. I want to expand it. He cut into his salmon unhurried. Some of our major investors, a few family members. We've had a strong year. I want to market properly. Celebrate what the firm has built. Camille was quiet for a beat. Then she smiled, wide and genuine and completely wrong about everything it meant. Desmond, that's wonderful. It'll be a full room, he said. I figured you'd want time to plan. She was already somewhere else in her mind. He could see it. Her eyes had gone slightly unfocused, the way they did when she was composing a vision of something. Her posture had changed. She was sitting straighter. I need to call my stylist, she said, almost to herself. He nodded and reached for his water glass. And that was that. She threw herself into it. Within 24 hours, she had a guest list drafted and a dress pulled from a boutique downtown, deep burgundy with a neckline that announced occasion. She texted 3 different friends about the dinner, describing it as a celebration, describing Desmond as finally coming back to himself. She rearranged the seating mentally at least 4 times. She called the restaurant to confirm the private room and added 2 extra guests without mentioning it to Desmond. She was radiant with relief. That was the only word for it. Whatever distance she'd felt from him in recent weeks had lifted, and she moved through the house with a lightness that made Desmond's chest feel tight in a way he didn't examine too closely. He let her plan. He said yes to what she asked, and didn't complicate the rest. The 3 of them met at Octavia's office on Thursday morning. Tobias arrived first, already pulling folders from his bag before he'd fully sat down. He'd prepared condensed 1-page summaries of the audit findings, clean, numbered, sourced, 1 packet for each investor who would be present. Nothing that required a financial background to understand. Every number traced to an original document. I'll have 20 copies ready by Friday evening, Tobias said. Bound. Indexed. Octavia had the legal documents sorted into a flat presentation folder. The forged will on top, the notarization discrepancy highlighted in yellow, the estate attorney's original appointment record paper-clipped to the back. She'd prepared a brief verbal summary she could deliver in under 4 minutes. Enough for the room to understand. More than enough for the record. Philip confirmed? She asked. He confirmed, Desmond said. He thinks the dinner is about the buyout moving forward. I told him I'd made a decision. Tobias looked up. And you have? I have, Desmond said. Octavia folded her hands on the table. I'll be seated to your left. When you're ready to shift from the investor remarks to the legal presentation, look at me. Don't announce it. Just look. Desmond nodded once. Yvonne brought the physical copies on Friday afternoon, appearing at his office door with a flat archival box and no fanfare. Original signed contracts, she said, setting it on his desk, tabbed by date, cross-referenced to the doctored versions Tobias flagged. Every page labeled. She straightened. I made 2 sets. Why 2? In case someone spills a drink, she said. He almost smiled. Thank you, Yvonne. She gave a single nod and left. No speeches, just the work. Done right. Saturday came quietly. The afternoon was gray and mild. Desmond spent the last 2 hours alone in his home office, going through his notes one final time. Not because he'd forgotten anything, because he needed to sit with the weight of it one more time before he walked into a room full of people who trusted him and said the things that couldn't be unsaid. He read through everything slowly. The dollar amounts, the dates, the scholarship fund entry that still, even now, landed like a physical thing somewhere below his sternum. Then he closed the folder, straightened the edges, and placed it in the interior pocket of his jacket. He went upstairs, stood in front of the mirror, adjusted his collar, smoothed the shoulders of his jacket, and looked at himself for a long, quiet moment. Downstairs, the front door opened. Voices. The first guests arriving. Desmond took one slow breath. Then he walked down the stairs to begin the evening. The private room at Oleander was full by 7. 12 people around a long table dressed in white linen, candles burning low, the kind of soft lighting that made everyone look their best. 2 of the firm's major investors, Gerald Park and Susan Lowe, sat near the center, their spouses beside them. Octavia was to Desmond's left, as planned. Tobias sat 3 seats down, relaxed, his hands folded in his lap. Yvonne was near the far end, the archival box on the empty chair beside her. Camille sat across from Desmond, radiant in her burgundy dress, her hair pinned up, her wine glass half full. She'd been laughing at something Gerald's wife said when Desmond rose from his chair. The room settled naturally. People expected a toast. Desmond held his glass, but didn't raise it. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said. His voice was even, unhurried. "I told most of you this was a celebration, and in a way, it is." He paused just long enough. "But first, I need to share some findings with everyone in this room, because some of you have money in this firm, and you deserve the truth about what's been done with it." The silence shifted. Gerald Park set down his fork. Desmond nodded toward Tobias, who stood without a word and placed a bound packet in front of each investor. "What you're holding," Desmond said, "is a forensic audit summary compiled by Tobias Greer, a certified forensic accountant. I'll give you a moment to look at page 1. The room rustled, pages turning. Susan Lowe's expression changed within seconds. "For 3 years," Desmond said, "vendor invoices processed through this firm have been systematically inflated. The excess funds were routed to a shell subcontractor, an LLC registered under the name Bellamy Holdings." He paused. "Bellamy is Camille's maiden name. The LLC is registered to her." He didn't look at Camille yet. He kept his eyes on the room. "The account receiving those funds," he continued, "connects directly to Philip Voss, who has, for 3 years, been stealing from the firm he co-owns, from me, and from every investor at this table." Philip laughed, short and sharp, the way men laugh when they're afraid but too proud to show it. "Desmond, come on. This is page 3, Desmond said calmly. "The wire transfer records." Philip stopped laughing. Now Desmond looked at Camille. She was very still. Her wineglass was still in her hand, but she'd forgotten about it. Her eyes were on his face, and behind them something was happening. A rapid, private recalculation. The look of a person who is trying to determine exactly how much someone knows. He was about to show her. 12 days ago, he said, "I showed you the deed to our house. I told you we were almost free and clear. I was giving you a preview of what I'd planned to give you as an anniversary gift." He held her gaze. "Do you remember what you said?" Her jaw tightened slightly. "Desmond, you said, and I'm quoting exactly," he paused, "the best gift would be if you just died." The room went completely silent. Camille's face flushed dark. "That is not—" "You thought I was asleep," he said. He kept his voice level, almost gentle. "You thought the air conditioner covered it. It didn't." He let that sit for one beat. "That was the moment I stopped wondering and started looking." Philip shifted in his chair. "You're taking something out of context and turning it into a— This whole thing is theater, Desmond. You're performing for investors." "Then challenge the documents," Desmond said simply. Silence. He glanced at Octavia. She stood. No preamble. 6 months ago, Octavia said, sliding a clear folder to the center of the table, Camille Whitfield visited an estate attorney and filed a new beneficiary designation naming herself sole heir to this property and to Desmond's 70% stake in the firm, contingent on his death or incapacitation. She tapped the top sheet. "The notarization on that document is forged. I've already filed to invalidate it. The marital trust has also been dissolved, effective 3 days ago." She sat back down. "Quietly and legally." Camille turned to her. "You have no right." "Page 7, Tobias said. softly. Just those 2 words. Gerald Park turned to page 7. He read it. Then he set the packet down and didn't pick it up again. "The buyout Philip proposed," Desmond said, returning to the room's attention, "is void. The partnership agreement contains a fraud forfeiture clause on page 14. A clause Philip drafted himself in 2011. Fraud by any partner triggers automatic forfeiture of that partner's shares. Tobias has prepared the notice." He looked at Philip directly. "You built the door. I'm just walking you through it." Philip stood. His chair scraped the floor. "You think this is going to hold up?" "My attorneys will." Yvonne's voice came from the far end of the table, steady and flat. "The original signed contracts are in this box." She placed her hand on top of it, dated, tabbed, and cross-referenced against every doctored version you submitted. Original signature, not altered. She looked at him without blinking. "I kept everything." Philip looked at the box, then at Yvonne, then at Desmond. He sat back down. And after that, nobody moved for a long moment. The candles burned. The investors looked at each other, then at their packets, then at nothing in particular. Camille stared at the table, the burgundy dress suddenly all wrong for the room it was in. Philip's jaw was set, his hands flat on the table, his eyes on a fixed point that wasn't anyone's face. Chairs shifted. Quietly, Gerald Park folded his copy of the packet and placed it in his jacket. He murmured something to his wife. Susan Lowe was already gathering her wrap from the back of her chair. One by one, people began to collect their things, speaking in low voices, moving toward the door with the careful restraint of people who have witnessed something they will be talking about for a long time. The room emptied slowly around Camille and Philip, until the candles burned for no one but them. The paperwork took 3 weeks. Desmond sat across from Octavia at her office every other day, signing things, reviewing things, watching the architecture of his old life come apart with the same precision he'd used to build it. Octavia moved fast. She always did. But this time, she moved with something extra, a satisfaction she didn't bother to hide. "Philip's attorneys called again," she said one morning, sliding a letter across her desk. Desmond read it without picking it up. "What do they want?" "To negotiate. Keep it civil. Maybe walk away with something." She leaned back in her chair. "I told them the fraud forfeiture clause doesn't leave room for civil." Desmond nodded. "Good." The forfeiture held. Every arbitration attempt Philip made ran straight into the partnership agreement he'd helped write. The same document he'd apparently never read closely enough to fear. His 30% share evaporated. No buyout, no severance, just the door and the long walk through it. The criminal referral went to the district attorney's office in the 4th week. Embezzlement, wire fraud, forgery, through Camille's LLC. The amounts Tobias had documented were not small. 3 years of inflation, 3 years of rooting, 3 years of careful theft. It added up to just over $400,000. That number appeared in the business section of the city paper on a Thursday morning, beneath a photo of the firm's building and Philip's name. By Friday, 2 of his professional memberships had quietly declined to renew him. By the following Monday, the phone in his home office had stopped ringing with the kind of calls that matter. Camille's collapse was quieter, but no less complete. The forged will was invalidated inside of 2 weeks. Octavia had done most of the work before the dinner. The prenup, which Camille had signed 12 years ago and apparently never thought about again, was airtight. She'd called it just paperwork. Once, at a brunch with her friends, laughing a little, the way people laugh at things they don't think will ever apply to them. It applied now. She left the marriage with her personal belongings, her car, and a settlement figure that reflected exactly what the prenup said she was entitled to, which was not much. The house stayed with Desmond. It had never moved. He'd frozen the transfer the same night he'd called Octavia from his car, weeks before Camille ever sat down at that dinner table in her burgundy dress. She and Philip lasted another 6 weeks after the dinner, maybe less. The stories that made it back to Desmond, through Octavia, who heard from colleagues, who heard from people who knew people, were not surprising. Philip blamed Camille for the LLC being in her name. Camille blamed Philip for involving her without explaining the exposure. Both of them were right. Neither of them forgave the other for it. 1 year later, the sign above the downtown entrance read, Whitfield Design Group. The ampersand was gone. The name after it was gone. Just his name now, clean and straight against the stone facade, the way it should have read from the beginning. Yvonne's new title was on the door at the end of the main hall. Yvonne Castellano, Managing Partner. She'd objected at first, said she wasn't looking for recognition, that she'd just done what was right. Desmond had told her that was exactly why he was giving it to her. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, he sat beside a young architect named Marcus at the wide drafting table near the windows. Marcus was 26, fresh out of graduate school, the kind of serious that comes from caring too much about getting things right. He reminded Desmond of himself in a way that was hard to explain out loud. The load calculation is off, Desmond said quietly, tapping the corner of the blueprint. Not harsh, just certain. Marcus leaned in, studied it, and after a moment said, Yeah, I see it. You had the right instinct, Desmond said. The geometry was sound. You just trusted the software more than your read of the site. Marcus nodded slowly, making a note in the margin. Desmond leaned back. Through the window, the city moved at its usual pace. Foot traffic, car horns, the low-grade hum of a place that didn't slow down for anyone. He'd built something inside all of it. Built it from nothing. From a folding table in a garage. From early mornings and late nights and 15 years of patience. It was still here. Only his now. Wholly and completely his. The apartment Camille rented was on the 4th floor of a building 20 minutes from the house she used to live in. On a Wednesday evening in October, she was sitting on her couch with a glass of wine she hadn't touched when the local news cut to a feature story. The anchor smiled at the camera. Whitfield Design Group has been awarded the contract for the city's new Civic Arts Center, a landmark project valued at $38 million. Founder and principal architect Desmond Whitfield accepted the award at a ceremony this afternoon. Desmond's face filled the screen. Calm, steady, at ease in a way she hadn't seen in years, or maybe had never really looked for. Camille set down her glass. She picked up the remote. She turned off the television, and the room went dark and quiet around her. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.